Welcome back to Compassion Over Silence. I'm Rashida Saunders. Today, we're talking about the difference between leading and performing, and I want to start with a confession. I know how to look like I have it together. I mean, really. I can walk into a room with a plan. I can facilitate the meeting. I can answer the questions. I can make the decision. I can handle the problem. I can keep my face neutral when something completely unexpected happens. And if you've ever worked in public safety, you already know that face. That face that says, everything is fine. We have a plan. No one panic. Meanwhile, internally, you're thinking, well, this was absolutely not on the agenda. I know how to do that. I've had years of practice. And for a long time, I thought that was leadership. Maybe not consciously. I never sat down and said, leadership means looking like you know exactly what you're doing at all times. But somewhere along the way, I absorbed the message. Good leaders are steady. Good leaders are confident. Good leaders have answers. Good leaders don't get rattled. Good leaders walk into the room and somehow make everyone else believe everything is under control, even when they're figuring it out in real time. And listen, sometimes that is necessary. There are moments when people need us to be calm. There are moments when leadership requires decisiveness. There are moments when uncertainty cannot become paralysis. But there is a difference between being steady and performing steadiness. I didn't always understand that. Welcome back to Compassion Over Silence. This season, we're talking about leadership, but probably not leadership the way you've heard it discussed before. I'm not interested in giving you 10 habits of highly effective people. I'm not going to spend 12 episodes telling you to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, drink more water, color code your calendar, and dominate your day. Although, drink your water. I'm serious about that part. But this season is about something deeper. What happens inside us when other people begin depending on us? What happens when responsibility becomes identity? What happens when the pressure to be competent slowly becomes the pressure to appear invulnerable? And what happens when the person everyone trusts to lead no longer knows how to let anyone see them uncertain? Season 1 was deeply personal. We explored the experiences that shape us, the stories we carry, and how healing changes the way we move through the world. This season begins somewhere different, because once we've done the work of understanding ourselves, another question emerges. How do we lead? Not just effectively, not just professionally, but authentically. Today, I want to talk about something I've been thinking about for a long time, the difference between leading and performing. And I want to begin with something I had to learn about myself. There have been times in my career when I walked into a room already prepared to defend myself. Nobody had attacked me. Nobody had accused me of anything. Sometimes nobody had even said anything yet. But I was ready. You know that feeling? You've already rehearsed the conversation in the car. You know what they might say. You know what you're going to say back. You have evidence. You have dates. You have screenshots. You have Exhibit A through F. They haven't even started talking, and internally you're already presenting your closing argument. I've been there. And the interesting thing is, I could still look completely composed. I could sit there professionally, nod, take notes, ask appropriate questions. From the outside, I looked present, but internally, I wasn't listening. I was preparing to explain, preparing to justify, preparing to make sure no one misunderstood my intentions, preparing to protect the version of myself I needed them to see. That is when I began understanding something. Sometimes performance doesn't look fake, sometimes performance looks highly competent. At first glance, leadership and performance can look almost identical. Both involve confidence. Both require composure. Both ask us to make difficult decisions. From the outside, it can be hard to tell the difference, but internally, they're not the same. Performance is about managing perception. Leadership is about building relationships. Performance asks, how do I appear? Leadership asks, how do I serve? Somewhere along the way, many leaders begin confusing the two. I don't think it happens intentionally. I think it happens because leadership is demanding. The higher the responsibility, the more pressure we carry. We're expected to remain calm. We're expected to have answers. We're expected to make decisions quickly and confidently, even when we're uncertain. And if you lead long enough, something else happens. People begin watching you. Not in a creepy way. Well, hopefully not in a creepy way, but people watch leaders. They watch your face when bad news enters the room. They watch what happens when someone disagrees with you. They watch whether your tone changes when your boss walks in. They watch what happens when a mistake is made. They watch who gets grace. They watch who gets questioned. They watch what you do when you don't know the answer. And after a while, you become aware of being watched. That awareness can change you. You start managing the room. Then you start managing perception. Then, if you're not careful, you start managing yourself so tightly that no one actually knows you anymore. Over time, we learn to protect ourselves. We develop armor. Armor serves a purpose. I want to be clear about that because I don't believe in romanticizing vulnerability. Some environments are not safe. Some people have not earned access to you. Some workplaces will absolutely use personal information carelessly. Some leaders will ask for honesty and punish you for giving it. That is real. Armor can help us survive demanding environments. It creates distance from overwhelming experiences. It allows us to continue functioning under pressure. And in many professions, especially public safety, healthcare, education, and executive leadership, armor isn't just accepted, it's rewarded. Composure becomes synonymous with competence. Emotional restraint is interpreted as professionalism. The person who says, I'm good, gets another assignment. The person who handles everything gets more to handle. The person who never asks for help becomes the person everyone depends on. And suddenly, your coping mechanism has a performance review. Think about that. The thing you learn to do to survive becomes the very thing people praise you for. You don't need anything. You're so strong. You always figure it out. Nothing bothers you. We can count on you. Those words can feel like compliments. Until one day you realize you've built an entire identity around never needing what you freely give everyone else. Eventually, those behaviors stop feeling like choices. They become habits. And before we realize it, we're no longer simply using armor. We're operating from it. That's the moment leadership can quietly become performance. I've seen this happen in rooms where everyone knew something was wrong and nobody said it. Maybe you've been in one of those rooms. The meeting starts. Everyone is polite. The agenda is beautiful. There might even be a PowerPoint. And everybody knows the real issue is sitting right there in the middle of the table, but no one touches it. So we discuss timelines, we discuss process, we discuss deliverables, we discuss everything except the thing everyone talked about before the meeting. And then the meeting ends. People walk into the hallway, and suddenly everybody can speak again. Have you ever noticed that? The most honest meeting sometimes happens after the meeting, in the parking lot, at somebody's desk, in the text thread, in the phone call on the drive home. That tells us something. People are not silent because they have nothing to say. Sometimes they are silent because the room has taught them where honesty is safe, and leaders help create that room, whether we realize it or not. When leadership becomes performance, we become more committed to appearing steady than remaining present. We become excellent at projecting confidence while slowly losing connection. Communication becomes more guarded. Feedback becomes harder to receive. Conversations become safer but less honest. Trust remains surface level. From the outside, everything still looks successful. The meetings happen, the decisions get made, the work gets done, the emails get sent, the strategic plan has very nice fonts. But something essential begins to narrow. Leadership continues, presence slowly disappears, and I have had to ask myself hard questions about this. Not just as a police officer, not just as someone who has held leadership responsibilities, as a mother, as a coach, as a founder, as a person. Because leadership does not only happen in conference rooms. Sometimes leadership is your daughter trying to tell you something when you're tired. Sometimes it's a young person watching how you respond after they disappoint you. Sometimes it's a colleague walking into your office and saying, Can I be honest? And I have learned to pay attention to what happens inside me when I hear those words. Can I be honest? Because sometimes what I want to say is, Absolutely. Of course. This is a safe space. And then they start being honest. And suddenly I'm thinking, oh, not like that. That is leadership too. Can we stay present when honesty is inconvenient? Can we remain curious when feedback threatens the story we tell about ourselves? Can we hear someone's experience without immediately turning the conversation into a defense of our intentions? That is hard work. Leading without armor doesn't mean becoming emotionally exposed in every conversation. It doesn't mean abandoning boundaries. It doesn't mean sharing every thought or emotion. Please do not leave this episode and start telling everybody at work everything. That is not what I said. Healthy leadership still requires discernment. It still requires professionalism. It still requires wisdom. Leading without armor simply means recognizing when protection is helping us and when it's preventing us from connecting. It asks us to notice our internal reactions before they become our external responses. It asks us to pause before becoming defensive, to listen instead of preparing our next explanation, to receive feedback without immediately protecting our identity. That kind of leadership requires two things: awareness and regulation. Awareness allows us to recognize what's happening inside of us in real time. Regulation allows us to stay grounded long enough to respond intentionally instead of reacting automatically. Those aren't soft skills, they're leadership skills. And I've become increasingly convinced that some of our greatest leadership failures do not begin with bad intentions. They begin with unexamined reactions. A leader feels embarrassed, so they become controlling. A leader feels threatened, so they become defensive. A leader feels uncertain, so they become rigid. A leader feels exposed, so they punish the person who told the truth. Then we call it a communication problem. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is armor. Because leadership has never been only about direction, it's about relationship. People rarely remember every decision we made. They remember how safe they felt bringing us difficult conversations. They remember whether they were heard. They remember whether mistakes became opportunities to learn or reasons to hide. They remember whether our leadership created trust or simply demanded compliance. And I know that because when I think about the leaders who changed me, I don't remember every policy they implemented. I don't remember every meeting they facilitated. I remember moments. I remember the leader who made room for me, the person who saw something in me before I fully knew how to name it myself, the person who corrected me without humiliating me, the person who could hold a standard and still leave my dignity intact. And I also remember the opposite. Most of us do. We remember the room where we learned to stop talking, the moment we realized honesty had a cost, the leader whose mood determined the emotional weather of the entire team. You know that leader. They walk in and everybody starts checking the forecast. Oh, it's cloudy today. Possible thunderstorms around 2 o'clock. Keep your head down. That is culture, too. That's why leading without armor matters. Not because vulnerability automatically makes us better leaders. It doesn't. But presence can. Self awareness can. Regulation can. The willingness to remain connected when our ego wants protection can. The strongest leaders aren't the ones who never wear armor. The strongest leaders are the ones who know when they no longer need it. They understand that authority isn't diminished by humanity, it's strengthened by it. As we move through this season together, we're going to explore trust, culture, accountability, emotional intelligence, compassion, silence, mistakes, difficult conversations, and what healthy leadership actually looks like in practice. But I also want to tell you stories from rooms I've been in, moments I got right, moments I absolutely did not, lessons from policing, lessons from motherhood, lessons from coaching, lessons from leaders who changed me, and probably a few stories that will make me question why I own a microphone, because I don't want this season to be a lecture about leadership. There are enough of those. I want us to talk about what leadership actually feels like when real people are involved. Messy people, complicated people, talented people, tired people, people who disagree with us, people who disappoint us, people who need something from us when we are already running on empty. Because that is where leadership lives. Not in the quote, not in the title, not in the performance, in the relationship. My hope isn't simply that you'll become a better leader. My hope is that you'll become a more present one. Because leadership was never meant to be a performance, it was always meant to be a relationship. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Compassion Over Silence. If this conversation resonated with you, follow the podcast and share this episode with someone who leads others. And if you've ever sat through a meeting where the real meeting happened in the parking lot afterward, just know I see you. Until next time, remember this: the leaders we remember most aren't the ones who perform leadership perfectly. They're the ones whose humanity gave us permission to bring our own. Leadership, humanity, honest conversations.